All right, we are back with another episode of the Six Yard Line podcast, and as you can see, my co-host and I are both recording together. Feels like it's been forever. How you doing there, Noel?
Good man. I know I said that the other day. I'm like, I feel like I haven't done this in so long, but it's just, yeah, it's my schedule at the moment, right? Screwing everybody up. So, yeah, actually, the international break's coming up again, which I'm so annoyed about. I am so bored of the international football. So obviously we'll have a bit of content. I think you and me just talked about it off air. I think we'll do a bit on the VAR, the referee calls, because again, it's another one of those weeks where we sit here and we have those moments where you're just scratching your head, going, "What the heck?" So we'll do a little bit on that during the international break. I think it's long overdue, and
Yeah,
the state of refereeing is something we definitely want to talk about.
yeah, definitely. But as you said, we will get into that in a little bit. Let's jump right into this weekend's games because we had some Liverpool finally dropped out of first place for looking back into last year. It's been almost a full calendar year since Liverpool's been out of first place.
It's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, it is crazy. So, but like I said, let's get into it. Do we want to touch on the first game, which actually I didn't watch it because I didn't know there was a Friday night game or a game here afternoon for us. But based on where they're in the table, just a quick note: the Cherries are on fire this season. They're in fourth place, got a 3-1 victory over Fulham. I think it was a come from behind victory, if I'm not. Yeah, yeah, they were down 1-0 and then came back late in the game. It was all late winners. Banger by Clivert. Um, Apparently, all the Clivert boys scored this past weekend. So can you just like, if you're a dad and you're looking at your stats, like, yeah, those my boys killing it.
Yeah, I saw
But
that
yeah,
actually because I was flying, and when I landed, I saw the score. It came up on my phone. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know there was a game today." So yeah, you know what they, as we pointed out earlier, they got on a good run at the end of last season. They had a bit of a blip towards the middle part of the season last year, and then I think they kind of rounded back into a little bit of form towards the end of the season, and they've carried on. And we questioned how they were going to be this year, and they let a lot of players go, but I think they are a well-run club. They don't panic. They do seem to make decisions based on like going forward and in terms of having somebody a bit like Brighton. They've got a plan of if this person leaves, this person's coming. This is the fit, the model. And if I look at Brighton and I look at Bournemouth, they are very similar in that style, right?
yeah. Clearly, they have a model where it seems like a year ahead of time, they're already prepared. They know that, all right, we're probably going to lose player A, B, and C. Let's have let's be ready for that so that we're not panicking. They're prepared because, like I said, we anticipated them to kind of drop off this season, lose a couple good players, key players from them last year, but they haven't lost a step. In fact, they seem to have, improved from last season. So good on them. Do I think they'll stay where they are? No. I think, when you look at all the teams that are kind of right behind them, you're talking the Chelseas, the Man Cities, like the big clubs that we expect to be in the fight will be there. So either way, it's still, not what anyone would have predicted.
What I would say is with them, they have a bit like Crystal Palace. They have a very good manager that has got a very good, stable environment, and it's letting them thrive.
Yeah.
I guess we were going to shift onto Forest versus Newcastle in a minute, but when you talk about stable club, not a lot of drama, not a lot of stuff going on, I think Bournemouth, Brighton are that, right? And I think Bournemouth is, obviously Areola has been fantastic for the last 2 years in the Premier League with Bournemouth, and you gotta wonder when his big job's gonna come because I do think it will be sooner rather than later. It's either going to be him or Glasner that I think are on everyone's shortlist. So, Man United's up and down every week, so that hot seat is going to come available at some point in the season. And
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what they do. But as you said, it's a good start for them.
Yep. I guess, briefly we could just look at Spurs beating Leeds 2-1, which Spurs seem to be kind of back on track with, you get the right manager for that club, he can right the ship. It's a big tell, when you look at the difference from last season to this season. But are Spurs the kind of team that one or two major injury away, and then they're going to struggle, right?
Yeah,
Because that was
exactly.
we have to be realistic. That was a big issue for them last year. Man United 2-0 over Sunderland. A scoreline I think I don't want to say I think we're surprised because you never know what you're going to get from Man United week in, week out. And that's the problem. One week they can look like they can play with the big boys. Then the next week they look like they're going to be in the relegation battle. So it's really hard to gauge that team.
Yeah, I think United. Well, Sunderland's hard to predict too because they obviously the week before won at Forest, with quite a defensive display. And I think if I look at that United game, they are at home. It is a game they should win, and you know, I watched a bit of it. I watched the highlights. They played well enough to win, and I think that's the thing in a team like Sunderland. They've got to score the first goal.
Yeah.
And that's we saw it last week against Forest. They just battered down the hatches and defended like their lives depended on it, which is shows the unity and the buy-in. But I think United, they've spent. Let's not sugarcoat it. They spent 250 million in the summer. They spent a lot of money. They brought in Sesko. They brought in Embuemo, who does look very good in the United shirt, and they've got an awful lot of talented players. Do I think defensively they're very good? Not really. I do think they're still prone to those lapses, and I think at the end of the day, you look at United, they should be beating Sunderland anyway. And after
Yeah.
250 million spent, they're at 10 points. They are where I thought they would be in the league, and I think Mason Mount coming back is, and if they can keep him playing well, then I think they're good. I think they will score more goals eventually. I just don't know if Amarim is the right coach for them. I don't, we just talked about it, with Glasner and Ariola out there. At the end of the day, I think at some point Amarim's going to get fired because that seems to be the Man United circle. That's what they do, and I'm not convinced by a 2-0 win at Sunderland. Again, if they can win back-to-back games and beat some teams of note, yes, they beat Chelsea, but
Well, put it this way: they play Liverpool coming out of the international
I
break.
saw that
So
on is it October 10th or the 18th?
19th. I just checked.
I did see
The
that actually.
Sunday morning game. So that'll be interesting. You know what? I'll say this: Sesko looked good for them. He's starting to look lively and a good target man. Much more of a number 9 than what they've had in the past. So that will definitely benefit. Healthy Mason Mount is a big deal for them, but you're right. Defensively is where they have had issues. Their young keeper got a shutout last week or this past weekend. What's his name?
Lemons.
Lemons. Yeah.
Lemons.
So
Mhm.
his first game, he gets a shutout, which can only help a team that's struggling defensively. So we'll see. The international break probably doesn't help them because they, getting a good result and then turning around and having to now go on that break. You kind of lose that momentum. So we'll see how things, play out for them after that. I did see that game. I've just felt Sunderland just didn't look like they had the legs, or I don't want to say they were out coached, but maybe their game plan didn't work the way they expected or anticipated.
Yeah, I think it's fair. That's fair to say.
Next up, and I had this game on the big screen on Saturday, Arsenal versus West Ham. Probably not a surprising score line when you really break it down. Arsenal are the better team. Arsenal did lose Odegaard again, so that's probably going to be their biggest concern this season is how can they keep their key players healthy for long spells, right? Because this is Odegaard's already his second time he's got a knock. The first time wasn't that bad, but I don't know how long he's going to be out this week. But that doesn't, that is going to be a worry for them, even though they did get the win. They're now top of the table. They're playing some good football, but it has to be again a concern if you're an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, I think that they got West Ham at the right time too, right? Because obviously the transition to Nuno is not long to kind of really implement a plan to kind of go against Arsenal. So I think that helps in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It's there for Arsenal to lose. Like we said it, but Arsenal been second place for the longest time. Like it's we're 7 weeks into the season, and I'm at this point where Arsenal's played okay. They've done some good things. I think Eze's been probably one of those players that might be the difference in them winning or losing the league this year, because I do think that injuries are going to play effect at some point, and it just depends on how you deal with them, right? You're starting to see it, right? A couple of teams that have got injuries early have really struggled to get going, and it's just that's part of the game, right? It's
Yep.
it's like anything we do. It's just part of the game, and you start to see the injuries kind of clock up in certain teams, and then you're like, oh, okay, well that explains a little bit why they're not doing what they were supposed to be doing, and so on and so forth. But yeah, Arsenal, you got to do what you can only beat who's in front of you, and they seem to be keep winning with whoever's in front of them at the moment. So it's not a bad time for them to keep the run going, right?
Yeah, and you know what? With they are a team that's expected to be fighting for the title, so they are where they're supposed to be, I guess, right? But it is like you said, it's only week 7, and there's still 31 games to go, and we're far from crowning anyone the champions. And speaking of champions, I guess we can briefly touch on the World Club Cup champions versus the defending Premier League champions. And you know what? Liverpool's been playing some shit football as of late, and there's no other way to sugarcoat it. If you're like, I've been avoiding Twitter because Liverpool community is so toxic right now. Oh my god, it's fire slot, bench Salah, this that, like it's just Kanate slander, Wort slander, this that. It's just like, oh bro, like I think people are over panicking. Are we playing some bad football? 100%. We haven't looked good at all to start the season. But I think there's so many factors that people are just ignoring. And I think the biggest factor is they had to deal with the death of a teammate. And I don't think people are truly understanding the mental scope that has to weigh on this team. Every day they go into that locker room at Anfield, they have a reminder of Diego Jota week in, week out. They have honored him, but that by honoring him, you have to question, is that playing mentally like a heavy weight on their shoulders that we as fans aren't realizing we're seeing from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what I would say is I think it's one of the things that has changed this year. I think if you look at the scope of Liverpool and what they did in the off season, they brought in all these pieces, they upgraded a lot of players. All those times you do that, it takes a certain amount of bedding in, because yes, you didn't really change your lineup last year. You didn't really change a lot. Now this year, you've gone and added some pieces in Isak and Verts and all these guys. They all have to figure out how to play with each other. They all take time. You add the fact that the Jota thing in there as well. It's a lot to take. And I haven't really been on Twitter or the socials this week. With because of work and various things, but when I looked at it, I saw it the other day. Somebody was like, "Oh, they finally figured Arnie Slot out." Well, yeah, you do have a year of his tactics, his style. You do have, video footage from last year, and how you played them, and teams have adjusted to that, which is part of the process. It's part of why he wanted to bring in extra players to play a different way and a different, little bit more of a different dimension. So it's kind of one of those things that, again, I don't know why people panic, but it's not like, you know, I'm panicked because Forest has lost 7 in a row, and I'm panicked for a different reason. But I think Liverpool's panic is, it's, well, Arsenal keeps winning, and we're still trying to figure out our new team, our new, the new
Yeah,
players and all that stuff. And look at Chelsea. Chelsea's very similar. Again, you've got the same sort of thing. You've got all these new players, and they're up and down, and
yeah,
that's kind of what happens. But it is also week 7, and those things are going to happen. It's no different than, obviously I was watching the NFL all day yesterday, and there's teams that you're like, wait, they started 3-0 and now they're 3-2, and you're like, wait, you got injuries. Teams have now got footage on you. You're not a
yeah,
surprise anymore, and that's the same for Liverpool. You're not a surprise anymore. Arnie's not a surprise anymore, and at the end of the day, you're going to get teams that are going to figure you out to a certain degree, but you also now got to integrate your new players into the system, and that's where
yeah.
Liverpool are, right? Am I worried? No, not at all. Are Arsenal fans worried? Probably, because at the end of the day, when Liverpool do figure it out, there'll be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think what everyone has to remember, like, we're only a point off of first. It's not as if we are, in the bottom 10 and we're struggling. We're struggling, yet we're still like in the, yeah, we've got back-to-back losses, which is, disappointing, but like within the league, 3 in total. But we're not as if we are, not still in a great position, right? So as long as we can, maybe take times like the international break to, rest up for Slot to kind of get, watch some video. I think he does need to tweak some things. And I know a lot of people want to see Salah on the, maybe not always start, but people have to remember he's going to be gone in January for the African Cup of Nations. So they're going to try to get what they can out of him now, knowing you're going to lose him for like at least a month or so come January, right? So
Absolutely.
there's so many factors, and I agree with you. I think you hit it on the nail with regard to, you've got 6 or 7 new bodies. That's half of your starting 11 on any given Sunday. So it's going to take time to figure things out, and they still will probably look to tweak a thing or two between now or come January window as well. So I'm not panicking. As I said, I had to kind of stay away from the toxicity because it can be very toxic, as I'm sure you're aware, in the forest world right now. Yeah, that's kind of where it
Yes,
is.
I guess that's a segue into the next one, because we
Yeah,
might as well. Because I'm tortured right now. I haven't even had let's be honest. I was last week. I was on the West Coast, and I caught the end of the FC Midtjylland Toronto FC. Tells you how bad my head is. The Forest versus FC Midtjylland Europa League game, and I thought this was going to be a home win, no problems, and you'll get off the board, and here we go, we'll start to build something forward. Sloppy defending, you lose 3-2 there, and then they go to Newcastle, and I'll be honest, I said it to somebody on Sunday morning. I didn't expect anything out of this game because we just don't seem to beat Newcastle in Newcastle. I know we did last year, but it just seems to be one of those places, and yeah, I wasn't wrong. I am really generally annoyed with the first goal. I did feel the referee was intimidated by the atmosphere. I felt that was quite clear and obvious. Every time, the stadium kind of got on the referee's back, the next couple of calls went their way. And the goal, it's one of those ones I don't like. It's one of those bang bang plays that I don't really like, where two players go in for the ball and then one gets knocked down, and the team that knocks the player down takes the advantage. And if you haven't seen the play, Gibbs White goes into tackle Guimaraes, and then Guimaraes does get the ball, does play it, but he pushes Gibbs White to the ground, which then the ball falls to Dan Burn, who I felt again, did nothing but rugby tackle and throw players around the pitch. I just felt like he got away with so much stuff. I just the constant like
It's
pulling and grabbing, and the referee
I will
didn't. Yeah, I
I
really
will say
frustrated.
I will say this, and this is one of my biggest annoyance when it comes to officiating in the Premier League is, and especially when you a place like St. James Park, referees are so intimidated by that environment compared to some of the other places that they won't blow the whistle. We've seen games all season long where players are getting battered and beaten, and on a normal football match, that's a card or at least that's a foul, and the refs just kind of avoid making those calls when they're and usually it's Newcastle players that are doing the dirty tackles, doing the dirty fouls, and getting away with it. And that's my biggest beef when it comes to certain home stadiums where referees just are afraid to do their job.
Well, I think after the goal, and it's a banger. Don't get me wrong, it's an absolute banger. But the fact is, like, you impede the player, so it's not a foul in the sense that, oh well, but he pushes him to the ground. But in pushing him to the ground, he then can't tackle Dan Burn. That's where I'm like, and then Dan Burn breaks and then passes the ball to Guimaraes and he bangs it in. Like, that's the part where I don't like it, because you are gaining advantage by pushing him to the ground. And that's where you don't get that call. And I think the referee after it, because I think he kind of sat there and thought, oh, because the next four whistle blows, they weren't fouls for Forest. They weren't. Newcastle would be like, what if Forest has
Soft
scored from?
calls.
Yeah, they would give back calls, and I don't like that. You can see quite clearly the referee's gone, you know what, VAR's not got enough to overturn it, but I think that was a foul, and that's the give back calls, but the give back calls aren't changing the game. The referee changed the game, and this is why I'm frustrated, because against Newcastle and against Sunderland, the referee's decision on fouls in the build up to the play has led to the goals.
Yeah.
You can't, like, I'm still trying to work out the Dominguez foul for Sunderland. Like, I'm still mad about that. I'm still like, it's a foul, and then you call it simulation based on your opinion, and then they score from it, and it's a call that you just, again, I see. We were on about the Man United game. I think he flopped down like he'd been shot, and there's no simulation call for the other team, and that's where the consistency really is starting to really grind my gears, because I look back at those two games and go, well, okay, Newcastle Forest were pretty even. Forest had some chances, Newcastle had some chances. It wasn't. No one was setting the world on fire, and then they get a break and then they score, and it is an absolute banger of a goal. I
Yeah.
can't take anything away from him. And then it's just, you see the frustration kick in, and then you obviously the penalties of a penalty and Anderson on his return to Newcastle. But again, I think it's just frustration that you've got some calls in there where you're like, hang on a minute, that was a free kick at one end. It's not a free kick at the other end, and the frustration builds, and the frustration of the last few weeks is building, and Ange's in trouble. Like, we're 7 games in, the rumors are there. There's
But
talk already there in the building. He's not won. Your next game is at home to Chelsea on the 18th, and
but
you look what's
I
gonna. It's gonna be one of those things. It's gonna happen, right? It's just
well,
when is what
this
I'm at.
is that for. I'm sorry, this is all on Marinakis. He like
Well, no,
this
it's not.
is
I'm saying it's also on Nuno for acting like a petulant child.
fair, but you know what? Fair enough. But they, they should. There, I still feel they should have found a way to talk it out, man. Because here's the problem: is like, fine. You know what? Whether Marinakis felt that, Nuno crossed the line, whether Nuno felt whatever Nuno felt, like, I feel the wrong decision was made when it comes to,
It was the wrong
the coaching
hiring,
move.
but I also think it was, look, at the end of the day, based on from what we understand, like, look, Nuno wanted 4 or 5 players that were nothing like what Forest wanted. Forest wanted to change the style. Forest wanted to do a little bit more progressive and work their way up the thing. And I don't think they were ever going to agree because Nuno wanted to play a certain way, and Forrest and Marinakis wanted to play a different way. And I think that's inevitable. But do I think Ange was the right hire? Well, I said it from the day one. I don't think he was the right hire. And that's the problem with the fan base. No one's really behind him 100% because everyone's 50-50. Everyone I talk to is 50-50.
He does. His resume doesn't bode confidence. Yes, did he have success in the SPL? We all know he did. We all remember his I win trophies in my second year. And did he technically back his talk? Yes. However, if you actually break it down and look at his tenure in the Premier League, he's an average coach at best. Nothing like there's nothing about him that actually says he's going to help us to the promised land. And if you're a team like
I will
Forest,
say they have played some nice football. Like they have played in spells. They've played some nice football. Don't get me wrong, but the problem is, nice football doesn't necessarily win you games. And I know it's funny because like I talk to you about this all the time with Toronto FC. We played the most boringest football I've ever seen in my life. It's like we literally lull people into depression and to sleep with the style of football TFC plays. And
but
it's great to see Forest passing the ball, zipping it around, but you're getting found out. And I will say this, I think the two biggest things that no one really talks about right now with Forest is the fact that Ola Aina was probably the best right back in the league, in the Premier League last year. He was absolutely flawless. He's out. Murillo, who's been an absolute command at the back, has also been out. And again, I think last year, we talk about injuries, we talk about teams missing players. Those two players were so key last year. And the fact that they've both been missing pretty much since game one. I think Murillo played the first two games, but again, not where you want to be, not with the same team. Will Ange survive the international break? I don't know. I
I will assume he'll be here at least until mid to late November, October. So they'll give him an opportunity, out of the international break to try to right the ship. But if he doesn't get a win in October, like you have to think that he will be the next man out. Right? Potentially.
I think he'll be gone in the international window.
Right? So you already think the decision's been made?
Because
it's now the international.
Like I said with Nuno, I said if they were going to do it with Nuno, he would go in the international window, and I wasn't wrong on that. What I would say is, I don't know if you saw it, but Gerard Houllier was in the stand at Forest.
Oh my!
You read into that what you want, but he was 10 feet away from Marinakis. I just find that interesting. Let's just put it that way.
All right, you know what? That's we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. Let's move on. Another game that was going on at the same time as the Forest game was Everton at Palace. I had that game on the small screen, and you know what? This is what I'll say: is Everton moved from Goodison Park to their new Hill Dickinson or whatever it's called, and one of the things I think you and I touched on preseason was that they're going to need to make the new stadium their fortress and a place that teams are going to have a hard time even getting a draw. They're going to have to own that home stadium in order for them to, have seen improvement from last season. And so far, so good. They're making that from what all the announcers are saying, from all the everything you're seeing online. It's a place that a lot of people don't like going to with the atmosphere, the noise level, the intensity of the fans. It was designed in a way that if the team's doing well and the noise gets to that decibel level, it can be one of those places that the away team is going to struggle. And, even though Palace went up early, Everton didn't panic and they were able to claw back and get the late winner. Was it a Grealish winner? Grealish has been an outstanding signing, like potentially one of the signings of the summer. When you just look at impact he's had on a team, definitely has to be up there.
Yeah, you know what? I think the signing is a good signing for him, and it's a good signing for Everton. I think I said it at the time, said it a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a good thing, and that atmosphere in that big stadium and the excitement of that is it's always going to get the fans going. It's going to be a difficult place to go and play, and I think that's part of sometimes having a nice new shiny toy, right? But I think hey, Everton, under Moyes were always going to be a tougher proposition than they were under the previous 4 or 5 managers before after Moyes, right? So again, I just think if you look at this, Palace are not a pushover. I think Glasner's refusal to not want to sign a new deal tells you that he's got plans to move up into a different team. And let's be honest, Palace are a stepping stone for him. His resume is good. I think he'll end up at United. That's just my opinion. But you still have to beat Palace, and Palace are up there in the league like Bournemouth, had a very good start to the season. They seem to have
Yep.
Liverpool figured out. But for the most part, I think Everton, that's a team I think Everton can beat because what Palace do is very much similar to what Everton do. And they do kind of grind them out. It's just who's going to score the goals on the day. And, in this case, Everton got the goals to make the points. But I think if you look at how those teams play, they're very similar.
Yeah.
And then that crowd did have an advantage, but
And I'll say this: both of those teams are the kind of teams that they're gonna definitely be harder to play at home than they are on the road. They will. Their consistency is going to be an issue for both teams. Being able to consistently get good results week in, week out, right? They're both good teams, and they're both going to give all the team anyone they play a good match. But the problem is consistently can they get the wins? We saw how great Palace played last week against Liverpool. A little bit off this week, and that's the difference in these kind of teams is that they'll have one great weekend, the next weekend, not that they played horribly, but to be able to maintain that intensity week in, week out. When you don't have the depth, you don't have maybe the overall skill set that some of the bigger teams have. That's the difference between, being a top team consistently and, kind of being more of a mid-level team. And that's kind of where both Palace and Everton will probably be this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let's keep going then. You know what? Wolves, back-to-back draws. Probably, for how they started the season, I guess being able to get points on the board is crucial for them. Brighton, the kind of team you never know what you're going to get week in, week out. They're probably disappointed with that result, but if you're from a Wolves perspective, you're going to take it.
Absolutely, you're going to take it right now. Absolutely, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just,
like
they've started the season kind of how they started last season, where they seem to dig themselves into a hole and then they start to get a groove to find a way out of it. The good thing is that bottom of the table is right now is still after 7 games, you've still got quite a bit of scope of pulling some teams in there, right? So you have Wolves on 2 points. I think West Ham's at 4, Burnley's at 4, Forest 5, I think Brentford's 7, and I think
yeah,
Leeds and Fulham are at 8.
8.
And
Yeah,
I think a couple of wins and you're out of the bottom and up the table. So again, it's early in the season, and I think after the first 4 games, I think we were a little bit concerned. But there's signs of life. But we've seen this from Wolves last year. They did this last year. I just think you can't keep doing this too many times before. Southampton used to do this all the time, which used to drive me nuts with Southampton. They would end up in the bottom and then finally survive on the last day of the season. And I think Wolves have just got to, just keep going. and keep trying to grind out some results. People say it only takes a couple of wins and you're out of that foothold. So
Look at Villa. 2-3 weeks ago, Villa were right there with Wolves, right? And now they've. I don't want to say they're out of the relegation battle, but they feel a lot more comfortable in the
well, they're
position
up to
they're in.
13. They lost, draw, win. Like it just again, just as like I say, just takes a couple of wins and away you go, and it's confidence, right? And
Yeah,
you're starting to look at some of the teams at the bottom, and I think if you look at West Ham, you look at Forest, you look at Burnley, you just need
Burnley
some confidence, and if you don't get it, then you're going to end up down there. So the next results are important. Do you know what I mean?
for sure, for sure. So that's a massive point. And every point they're gonna need. The only thing I will say for Wolves fans is, or Wolves as a whole, they need to get wins. They need to now start to get, draws are great, shows improvement, but you're gonna have to find a way to get that even that first win just to get the monkey off your back.
Yeah.
Villa 2-1 over Burnley. They were up 2. Burnley did get a late one, but we're seeing Villa starting to get their footing under them, playing some better football in the past few weeks compared to how they started the season. But as we said, all it takes is once you get the momentum building. For them, I think it was once they were able to score a goal. That was their biggest confidence booster. Even though it happened in League Cup, it helped, I think, mentally turn things around for that team. And within a couple of weeks, they got their first win. And they've just built off that momentum. And that's all it takes is good result here or there and change your mindset and your confidence. And all of a sudden, you're out of that relegation battle and you're starting to gain momentum.
Exactly. Absolutely. I think that's a huge thing, right? Like you just got to gain momentum and move up the table. And I think that's kind of what you need to see. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? Burnley, like all the other promoted teams, are kind of where we expected them to be. They're going to have some. I think Sunderland are probably the biggest surprise of the three, but you know, you can't be surprised with these kind of results when you're a promoted team. Like you're going to have the odd good result, but you're going to struggle more often than not.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then finally, the last game of the weekend, which I did have on, but again, I wasn't really paying attention to. Man City away to Brentford. Um, Holland with a nice heart. I thought his goal was excellent. Like he
Very good
fought
finish.
for
Very
that
good.
goal. Um, and you just got to realize, like, if they, and I'm not wishing this on any team or any player, but if he were to go down in injury, does Man City have a second option for scoring goals?
Um,
Like a
not
real
like that.
threat.
Not like that. I think that's because they sold Alvarez. But like, yeah, I don't. Again, they are. I always feel City like a couple of the teams at the top that if those key players drop off, they'll drop off, and I think that's the problem. Squad depth has become clearly an issue in a lot of the teams. You know, we just talked about it with Forest, like the backups. Now you're playing backups in those key matches, and they've got to figure out how to replace those guys that aren't starting. And in a lot of cases around the Premier League right now, there's the backups aren't that great.
No. Now, City have to worry because Rodri goes down again. After his bad injury last season, I think he's already kind of, he came in a game, left earlier, and then again went down yesterday. You have to question, like, is he ready? Maybe they need to rest him a little bit more than just the 2-week international window, because they can't risk him another long-term injury with Roger.
No,
He,
and I think Guardiola said this morning that they're going to rest him for 3 weeks, just to give him right. And the problem is when, like, if you've never done your ACL, like what happens is, it's other things that go right because you work and rehab to a certain thing, and then other things go. It's well documented that you get the niggly injuries in other areas because you worked on one and not all over, right? So I think it's just how you recover, and it's kind of a common thing that seems to happen with ACL injuries. You pick up other injuries in
Yeah.
other areas on the same leg. And, I think they just need to be cautious with him. If they don't, then, they're in huge trouble. But I think he'll be fine. I think, listening to Guardiola this morning, I think he's pretty much sounds like that they have a plan for him and they are trying to give him some rest.
Yeah, which will be definitely crucial for them. So we'll see how things play out for them. But that's it when it comes to recapping this past week. A lot of interesting results. Things are still kind of playing out as we week in, week out. The international break probably comes at a good time for a few teams. I know Liverpool will be happy for the break. I don't know. I'm sure Forest as well. So we'll
I'm
see.
happy for the break because it's unless it would be nice to go a week without Forest being the main headline in every story. That'd be great. I would appreciate that, but we can't seem to manage that at the moment. So, but it's a
Well,
good I'll take. I'd rather be talked about than be irrelevant, and you know.
Well, you know what? We touched on the way the standings are right now. When you're in the top half, you get talked about, or at least the top, 6, and then when you're in the bottom 6, you get talked about. So being a mid-level team, just nobody cares. But being either the top or the bottom, you become a hot topic of conversation, good or bad. That's just the way it is.
Yep, exactly. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So we got 2-week break. That is it for this week. We decided to kind of just try to touch on each team a little bit. We haven't done that in a while. But stay tuned because we will be doing a VAR show because it seems you can't go a week without some kind of controversy within VAR. And it's just becoming a joke, plain and simple. So we'll touch on that at some point later on.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to smash a like and subscribe and leave us some comments. We love all that stuff. So please feel free.
Yeah, that's it, folks. Have a good one. Take care.